10 years ago, the Elgin Sports Hall of Fame Foundation's Board of Directors established the Team Recognition Award. This award is to recognize outstanding teams from Elgin's past. These teams are nominated by members of the Elgin Sports Hall of Fame, and they're based on standards of eligibility, then selected by the Hall of Fame Board of Directors. Tonight, we shall recognize a legacy team that performed and competed more than 75 years ago. And then we'll also recognize two teams that competed here in the city of Elgin since 1950. To recognize those first two teams tonight, I'd like to introduce Richard Renner.
This is going to be an Elgin High evening here. So. Anyway, good evening and congratulations to all of you who are being recognized here this evening. And it's my privilege to recognize two remarkable teams from Elgin sports heritage. Now, you're an audience I know who knows and appreciates and understands and has achieved sports excellence. Nevertheless, I'm going to be presenting teams from different eras more than 75 years ago. The 1920 Elgin High football team and the 1949-50 Elgin High basketball team. So buckle your seatbelts and let's take a time machine back more than a century to the fall of 1920. Now you would recognize football then. There were 11 guys, they played on a gridiron, they had 4 chances to get 10 yards. And the players did have helmets of a sort, but the drop kick was still popular. And the new forward pass was still a pretty exotic play. Now Elgin started the season with quite a challenge, losing by a touchdown to Oak Park, who had been the Cook County champions and undefeated for 2 years. But then they tore through their conference schedule, stumbling only to a 3-3 tie with Rockford. Well, now it's the postseason, and this is when things get a little bit different and a lot more interesting. Because in 1920, they were still 50 years away from a state championship football tournament. But the teams still wanted postseason competition, and Rockford and Elgin were both interested in a playoff game on Thanksgiving to determine the conference championship. But there was one problem. And it's a prominent problem even in today's sports: money. In 1920, Elgin High School and high school football was not funded by state or by school tax revenues. Football teams had to meet their expenses by themselves, and that meant arranging promotions and games which filled the bleachers and also paid the bills. Elgin had tied Rockford in a game at Rockford, and Elgin insisted that any playoff would have to be played in Elgin. Meanwhile, Rockford said that its popular Thanksgiving Day game was the one that filled the team's strongbox for the whole year. They guaranteed Elgin expenses, a big bonus, but they insisted the playoff had to be in Rockford. Well, in the meantime, Elgin found out that Decatur, the supposed champion football team of Central Illinois, would accept Elgin's financial terms for a Thanksgiving Day game. And then, totally out of the blue, Elgin received an invitation to travel to Connecticut to play a national powerhouse Stamford team. But the offer was contingent upon Elgin beating Decatur. That wasn't easy, but after a 6-point victory on Thanksgiving Day, Elgin turned its eyes to the east. And what it saw there was a Connecticut team which was pretty fearsome. Considered the champions of the East, the Stamford High School had lost only 4 games in 10 years. And in that season, they had outscored their opponents 309-6 and were, of course, undefeated. But Elgin put its whole heart into supporting this team, and with a frenzy of fundraising, some snappy new sweater coats for the players, and some Elgin watch dials to distribute as souvenirs and as promotional devices for the world's biggest watch factory, They sent their team to the east. Now, one key person would not be going to that game. Elgin's coach was sick at home with tonsillitis. Well, stepping in was a local attorney named Mike McNerney, who had starred at Elgin High School and had even quarterbacked the Notre Dame football team. But he had never played in an era of the forward pass. And so, after much media hoopla on December 4th, 5,000 spectators in Stamford watched a gripping football battle of the old and the new. Stamford started out with an attack, quickly making 2 forward passes and setting up a touchdown. Elgin stuck to its old ground game and never got close to the goal line. So the final score was 7-0. And the New York Times headlines said that the Maroons, the crack 11 of Illinois, had been defeated chiefly by an aerial attack. Nevertheless, the Elgin boys had really impressed the Eastern sportsmen, and another New York paper said that the game had been the hardest fought intersectional football game played in these parts in years. And indeed, in 1920, Elgin had one of America's finest football teams. Its only other loss had been to that Oak Park team, which ended its season by demolishing an Ohio high school team for the supposed high school championship of the Midwest. And Elgin's excellence was further confirmed by the careers of some of its players. For example, Gus Farwick, who became an All-American guard at West Point, and fullback Earl Britton, the primary blocker at Illinois for a guy named Red Grange, and who went on with Grange to play for the Chicago Bears. I'm pleased that we can remember and honor this really remarkable team tonight. But now let's take our time machine a generation forward to the fall of 1949. In the 1940s, Elgin had a remarkable series of basketball teams. But in the fall of '49, Elgin's team was a mystery. Most of the players from the preceding year had graduated, and some 50 boys had tried out for the new team. The season didn't start well with a 19-point drubbing from Suburban League champs Morton of Cicero, but Hall of Fame coach John Kraft molded some talented multi-sport athletes into a true basketball team. For example, football star Willard Schultz had been expected to be merely a backup center on the team. But by January, he was the starter, and in fact, the leading scorer in the conference. Nevertheless, the observers were a little skeptical of these Kraft kids, and it took some time for the team to garner even any honorable mention votes in the state polls. But by January, they were moving up in the state rankings until 2 losses had them scrambling to get a share of the conference championship. But they were recognized as a team of depth and balance rather than individual talent. And the champion Maroons did not have even one player on the all-conference first team. But as a team, they were recognized as among the top 10 in the state. And they only gained momentum as they worked through the state tournament. They upset that old foe Morton, third-ranked Morton, to win their sectional, and became the 5th team Coach Kraft had taken down to Champaign in 10 years. Now, a year earlier, Elgin had entered that tournament, the clear favorite to win the state title, only to suffer a really bitter defeat in the opening round. That memory likely inspired the 49-50 team to make sure their start of the tournament was a 35-point victory. So now described as polished and smooth, the Elgin team made a further statement by beating the Chicago champions Tilden, which qualified them then to play the defending undefeated champions Mount Vernon in the semifinals. Well, Elgin in that game jumped to an 8-1 lead, and they even outscored Mount Vernon in the full second half. But ultimately, they fell by a score of 57-49. But they came the closest to champion Mount Vernon of any tournament team. And in their consolation game, Elgin shot nearly 60%, to get third place. Now, characteristically, team members received relatively little individual all-tournament recognition, but they got high marks from their teamwork and as the tournament's finest shooting team. Ironically, although the team garnered relatively few individual awards, it included several members who had fine sports careers in college and beyond. And I'm truly honored this evening that we have here representing her father, one of the team members, Pete Kovacs. Amy Kovacs this evening has been gracious enough, and she brought with her her father's beautiful Elgin High sweatshirt. So thank you very, very much. Now on this team, Pete was not a starter, but he had an outstanding career the following year at Elgin High, and then he went on to a truly remarkable career at Monmouth College. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame at Monmouth. Just an outstanding coach here at Kimball and Elgin. So many people knew him. I'm very pleased that Amy was able to be here tonight. Also among that team was Dick Estergaard, who was the only Elgin athlete ever to play in the Division I basketball championship finals, and later played for the Boston Celtics. Again, I'm so honored that Amy is here this evening because regrettably, no members of this team are alive to join us tonight. The first to pass was the team's center and Hall of Fame member, Willard Schultz, who was killed in action in Korea just days before the 1953 armistice. The last was Hall of Fame member Ron Wiesner, who died last year and who has honored his basketball coach, John Kraft, with a scholarship that's still being awarded at Elgin High School. Well, as we step out of our time machine, we should know that beyond their achievements on the court or the field, these young men brought honor to Elgin and generated immense community pride. And I thank the Hall of Fame and you all this evening for honoring them and remembering their achievements. Thank you very much.